Wyoming Territory, December 1881. The snow came down like a curtain drawn across the sky, thick and fast, muffling the world in white as Naomi Renshaw tumbled from the rear of the wagon, her scream drowned in the blizzard's roar. The wagon didn't stop. Her gloved hands scrambled at the ice-crusted ground, boots slipping, skirts dragging. Wait, she choked, but the wind tore the word away. The wagon was already vanishing into the storm, the canvas top swaying like a ghost ship's sail. Her father, her stepmother, and her little sister didn't hear her fall. Didn't see her disappear. She staggered up, then fell again, snow catching in her collar. The cold bit into her skin with sharp teeth. She tried to follow the wagon's tracks, but the storm erased them faster than she could move. Her breath came short and shallow, heart-hammering, panic rising like a tide. She was alone. Then her foot hit a rock hidden under the snow, and she fell hard. Pain exploded in her ankle. She cried out and curled into herself, the cold already digging deeper. This was how people died out here. Alone, in the white silence. But somewhere past the wind, a shape moved. At first, she thought it was a shadow. Her vision blurred, her lashes stiff with ice. But it wasn't a shadow, it was a man. He was on horseback, wrapped in a heavy buffalo coat, scarf covering most of his face, dark eyes locked on hers. He dismounted fast, boots crunching on snow, and knelt beside her. "Can you walk?" His voice was low, steady. I fell," she gasped. "The wagon they didn't see." He looked back toward the storm, then down at her ankle. "You're lucky," he said. "Almost missed you." He lifted her carefully, mindful of her leg. She was half frozen, her body trembling against his as he carried her to his horse. He mounted first, then pulled her up in front of him, arms securing her tight against his chest. "I'm taking you to shelter," he said against her ear. "Hold on." She didn't have the strength to argue. Her fingers curled into the thick wool of his coat as the horse pushed through the drifts. She could feel his warmth against her back, his heartbeat steady even as hers raced. They rode for what felt like hours, the storm never letting up. Finally, a cabin appeared through the white curtain-low roof, smoke trailing from the chimney. He urged the horse forward, then slid off and carried her inside. The air inside hit her like a wave, warm, smoky, alive. A fire blazed in the hearth. First covered the floor. He set her down gently on a cot near the fire and pulled the coat from her shoulders. "You are half ice," he said, kneeling again. "Do not sleep." "Not yet." She blinked up at him. His scarf was off now, revealing a strong, angular face, his dark hair damp from the snow. His eyes were a deep, steady brown, the kind that did not look away when things got hard. Who are you?" she whispered. "Thatcher Zane," he said. "I trap and trade out here. Saw your wagon pass earlier. Knew it was too late in the season to be crossing these ridges." "I'm Naomi Renshaw," she said, voice shaking. "My family, they don't know I fell." He nodded. "Storm's too thick to track them now. You would have frozen if I hadn't found you." She swallowed hard, tears welling despite the heat. "Thank you for stopping. I do not leave people behind." He worked quickly, building up the fire, setting water to boil, then wrapping her ankle with practiced hands. His touch was gentle but firm. When he noticed her shivering, he added another fur over her. "You're safe now," he said quietly. Naomi watched him move around the cabin. He was tall, broad-shouldered, quiet in his motions. Everything here was rough but clean. He poured her a tin cup of warm broth and helped her lift it to her lips. "You live here alone?" she asked, her voice steadier now. He nodded. "Have for some years." "And you saw the wagon pass?" "Earlier today. I tracked behind it in case something went wrong." "Guess something did." She looked down at the cup in her hands. "I should have screamed louder." "You screamed enough," he said. "I was just close enough to hear." She looked up then, and his eyes met hers. A strange warmth stirred in her chest, not from the fire, but from him. From the way he looked at her like she mattered. "You saved my life," she said. He held her gaze. Anyone with a heart would have done the same. She wasn't sure that was true. The wind screamed outside, shaking the cabin walls. But in here it was still, safe. He sat near her, not too close, but close enough she felt it. His presence, solid, unshaken. "Will they come back for me?" she asked softly. He hesitated. "Maybe, but they may not know you fell. Storm's bad. They may have to keep moving." She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Then I guess I am alone." "No," Thatcher said, his voice low. "Not anymore." The words pulled something from deep inside her. A tremor, then a quiet peace. She looked at him again. Really looked. And for the first time since she fell, she felt something break through the cold. Hope. He didn't touch her again that night, though he stayed near. He built up the fire, checked the door, kept the warmth steady. She watched him from the cot, her ankle throbbing but her heart beginning to slow. She did not sleep easily, but when she did, it was with the sound of his breathing nearby. And when morning came, the storm still howling, she opened her eyes and found him sitting at the edge of the cot, watching her with something soft in his eyes. Not pity. Something else. Something that made her chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with cold. She wasn't sure what it was yet, but she wanted to find out. Thatcher had already been up for hours by the time Naomi stirred. The cabin was still dim with early light, the fire low but steady. He moved quietly, ladling boiled oats into a tin bowl, steam rising in soft ribbons. Outside, the wind had eased to a whisper, but snow still pressed thick against the windows. Naomi sat up slowly, bracing herself with one hand on the cot's edge. Her ankle throbbed dully, wrapped firm beneath the quilt. Her hair, unpinned and tangled from sleep, shifted over her shoulder as she watched him pour water into a basin near the hearth. "You didn't sleep," she said. "I did," Thatcher replied, setting the bowl beside her. "Enough." She looked down at the oats, then back at him. "You don't have to do everything." He met her gaze, then crossed to the basin and began washing his hands. "You fell in the snow. You're hurt. I'll do what needs doing until you can." She touched the edge of the bowl, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. "Folks don't usually think like that. I'm not like most folks." She didn't argue. He was already drying his hands, moving with that same quiet economy he had the night before. No wasted motion, no words without weight. He pulled on his coat and opened the door. Light spilled in, along with the cold. Naomi flinched, curling deeper into the quilt. Thatcher stepped out, boots crunching over the frozen ground. She watched him through the frost-laced window. He checked on the horse first, then walked the perimeter of the cabin, scanning the ridge above. When he came back in, his beard was touched with ice, his brow furrowed. "They haven't come back," he said. Naomi didn't answer right away. She stirred the oats with her spoon, though she hadn't taken a bite. "They'll keep going," she said finally. "My father doesn't like to double back. He'd say I should have held on tighter." Thatcher closed the door with care. "That how he always was?" "Since my mother died." She paused. "He remarried a year later. My stepmother's younger than him. She's got her own child and not much space for me." He didn't speak, just crossed the room and poured himself a cup of coffee from the pot on the stove. Naomi looked down at her lap, her voice catching. "I don't think they'll come looking. You don't have to explain." "I know. She drew a slow breath. "I've never said that aloud before." He nodded once. "Truth sits heavy till it's aired." She looked up at him then. "Why are you out here alone?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he sat across from her, resting one hand on his knee. His eyes were steady, unreadable. "Wasn't always," he said. "Had a brother. We came out from Missouri. Started trading with the tribes east of here. He didn't make it through the winter 2 years ago. Fever." Naomi's expression softened. "I'm sorry." Thatcher gave a small shrug. "He was younger, braver in some ways. Took risks I wouldn't." They fell quiet again. The fire cracked softly. Naomi ate a few bites, the warmth settling in her stomach. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," she said. "You heal," he said. "Then we figure the rest. I have nothing. No money. No land." "You have time," Thatcher replied. "That's enough to start." She studied him. There was no pity in his voice, only certainty. It steadied her more than anything else had since the wagon left her behind. Later, he helped her to the chair by the hearth, careful with her ankle. She winced but didn't cry out. He gave her a sheepskin to drape over her lap and set to mending a torn strap on his saddle near the door. She watched his hands work the leather, steady and sure. "You've done this a long time," she said. "Long enough. Do you miss people?" "I don't miss the noise," he said. "But sometimes I miss a voice that stays." "Most folks pass through." Naomi looked into the fire. "Maybe I was meant to fall." He didn't look up. "Maybe you were meant to get back up." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It felt like something unfolding slowly between them, something neither of them had a name for yet but both recognized. When she dozed later in the chair, Thatcher didn't wake her. He moved quietly, splitting kindling out back, then returning to tend to the stew he'd started. As the shadows lengthened across the floorboards, he glanced over at her again. She hadn't stirred, her face softened in sleep, fingers curled against the wool. For the first time in a good while, he let himself watch her. Not because she was lost, but because she was here. By the third day, the snow began to slump from the pine boughs, heavy and wet, exposing the dark earth beneath in patches. Naomi stood at the threshold of the cabin wrapped in a shawl Thatcher had found in a trunk. Her ankle bore her weight unevenly, but she could manage with the help of a carved walking stick he'd made from a branch the day before without a word. She watched the sky, pale and still, like it hadn't yet decided whether to clear or fall again. The wind had quieted. The hush outside had depth to it now, trees creaking softly as if waking after a long sleep. Thatcher came from the lean to beside the cabin, carrying a bundle of firewood against one shoulder. He paused when he saw her, his gaze moving to her foot, then back up to her face. "You shouldn't be standing that long." "I needed air," Naomi said. "And I needed to see something that wasn't a wall." He walked past her into the cabin. She followed slowly, leaning heavier on the cane than she liked. Inside, the warmth pressed close. He knelt by the hearth, stacking the wood with careful precision. She lowered herself onto the bench beside the table, watching his hands work again, always sure, always deliberate. "Will you go to town once the snow clears?" she asked. Thatcher glanced over his shoulder. "I'll need to. Trade, check the mail? You'll come with me." "I don't have anything to trade." "You don't need to." She hesitated. "You said you don't usually keep company." "I said most folks pass through." Naomi studied the grain of the table under her fingers. "And what if I didn't pass through?" He sat back on his heels, elbows resting loosely on his knees. "You thinking of staying?" "I don't have a place waiting for me," she said. "Even if I found my family again. My place in the wagon was already fading." She swallowed. "I don't want to be someone's burden. I want to be useful." "You can be," he said. "But not for their sake. For yours." Her eyes met his. "Then teach me. What you know." "I can learn." He stood and poured water into a kettle without answering right away. The silence stretched, but not unkindly. "You ever got a fish?" he asked. Naomi blinked. "No." Split kindling. "No." Patch a trap line? She shook her head. He lifted one brow. "You afraid of blood?" "Only my own," she said. And something flickered behind his eyes, not laughter. Not quite, but close. "All right," he said. "We'll start with snares tomorrow. You'll need boots. I'll find a way to earn them. You already are." She looked down at her hands. "What changed your mind?" He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You didn't cry when the fever set in last night," he said. "Didn't complain when I had to reset the splint this morning. You don't flinch when I speak plain. That's more grit than most carry." Naomi's throat tightened. "No one's ever said that to me before." He shrugged. "Should've." A long breath passed between them. She stood slowly, testing her weight again, and limped to the stove. "Let me tend the beans?" "I can stir. I won't burn them." He didn't stop her. Just nodded and stepped aside. Later, as the kettle whistled and the scent of salt pork filled the room, she caught him watching her again, quiet, thoughtful. Not like a man pitying a woman he'd found half dead in the snow. Like he was beginning to see her as something else entirely. She didn't look away. Neither did he. A different kind of silence bloomed between them, then not empty, not uncertain. Just waiting. Like the land beneath the thaw. Ready if given time. The first snare didn't catch anything. Naomi crouched beside Thatcher in the low brush just past the tree line, hands stiff with cold despite the wool mitts he'd given her. The morning had been long, the skies gray but still, and her breath feathered in the crisp air between them. "You set it too close to the trunk," he said quietly, eyes on the broken loop of twine. "Rabbit sees the bark's been rubbed bare, knows something's wrong. They're quicker than folks give them credit for." Naomi frowned, brushing snow from her sleeve. "I thought I had it right." "You will. Takes time." She stood slowly, careful with her balance, and followed him through the underbrush. He moved with a natural ease, barely disturbing the snow. She tried to match his step, cane tucked under one arm, though each drift slowed her more than it did him. By midday they'd checked 5 more snares. One held a squirrel caught clean. Thatcher worked quickly, dispatching it with a practiced touch before slipping it into the burlap sack tied to his belt. Naomi didn't look away this time. "You ever skin one?" he asked. "No, but I can learn." He nodded and kept walking. She followed, the cold biting less now that she was moving, her breath steadier with the rhythm of the trail. Back at the cabin, she stood beside the table while he worked at the block near the window, showing her how to make the first cut, where to pull, how to keep the knife steady. Her hands weren't graceful, but she didn't flinch even when the fur peeled back. "You've got a good grip," he said, watching her. "I used to help my mother with chickens," she murmured. "It's not so different." He handed her a clean rag, and she wiped her hands before sitting down. He set the pelt aside, then rinsed the blade in a bowl of snowmelt. "You didn't ask about the letter," she said. "What letter?" "The one you might be expecting." "From town." He dried the knife. "Ain't one coming." Naomi tilted her head. "You don't write to anyone?" He shook his head. "Used to. When my brother first passed, I wrote to a woman back east. We'd spoken of marrying before I left Missouri. I told her I was staying out here. She wrote back once. Said she understood." Naomi studied his face, the quiet way he said it. "Did you love her?" "I think I loved the idea of her," he said. "But I didn't ask her to wait, and she didn't offer." She traced the rim of her cup. "Someone once told me I was too serious, that I made folks uneasy when I didn't smile enough." "You don't owe anyone that," he said. She looked up, surprised by the sharpness in his tone. He met her eyes. "People think quiet means cold. It doesn't." She felt something shift in her chest, then not sudden, not sharp. Just sure. Like a door she hadn't noticed was closed had been quietly opened. That evening, she rolled dough while Thatcher peeled onions near the stove. The rabbit stew simmered low, the scent filling the cabin in slow waves. Snow fell again, soft this time, brushing the windows like breath. "You ever think of leaving Wyoming?" she asked, her hands working the dough into rough circles. "I did after Eli died. But I couldn't bring myself to go east. Too much noise. Too many people who talk fast and don't say much." Naomi handed him the flattened bread. "You like the work?" "I like knowing what's mine. What I built with my own hands. Out here, no one gives you anything you don't earn." She leaned against the counter. "I think I'd like that. Earning something real." He placed the bread on the skillet and pressed it down gently. "You've already started." They ate by firelight, the meal plain but filling. When she reached for more, he passed it without comment, and when the stew was gone, they sat in silence broken only by the hiss of the logs. Naomi rubbed her hands together, then glanced at him. "You ever think about what it'd be like to live with someone again? Not just for a season. For good." Thatcher didn't answer right away. He looked down at his cup, fingers curled around it like he was weighing something that didn't come easy. "Sometimes," he said. "But it'd have to be someone who knows what quiet means. Someone who doesn't take silence as a wound." Her voice was steady. "And if she did, then I'd show her it wasn't." Naomi stood and added another log to the fire, the light catching the curve of her jaw as she turned. "I don't mind silence," she said. He rose, slow and deliberate, and crossed the space between them. He didn't touch her. Just stood close enough for her to feel the warmth of him, like the fire at her back. "I know," he said, and in that space between breath and breath, something honest settled between them. Not rushed, not spoken outright, but known. When she turned, their eyes met. He didn't move. She didn't need him to. The silence between them held. Not empty, not waiting, just whole. The thaw came slow, creeping in through the days like warmth long withheld. Ice slipped from the eaves in long, reluctant drips, and the snow line began its retreat down the ridge. Birds called again from the brush, tentative and light, and Naomi sat outside in the sun's hush, her mended ankle resting atop a flat stone warmed by midday light. Thatcher was splitting cedar rounds at the edge of the clearing, sleeves rolled up, the axe's rhythm steady and sure. He'd shown her how to read the grain before the first swing, how to gauge the knot's resistance. Her hands still bore the fresh calluses from trying it herself, though he hadn't let her push too hard. He never hovered, but somehow always knew when to step in. She watched him now, the way his muscles moved beneath the linen, the crease between his brows as he worked. There was a stillness to him, but not the kind that came from absence. His quiet was full of attention. "Thatcher," she called, shielding her eyes against the glare. He set the axe aside and walked toward her, wiping his hands on the cloth tucked at his hip. "I want to go with you when you ride to town," she said. "I'm strong enough now." He studied her face. "It's a long ride. I'll manage." He nodded once. "We'll go at first light." She rose carefully, testing her weight. "Will they ask questions?" "Some might. And if I don't have answers they like, they'll get used to that." She let out a breath, then looked back at the cabin. "I want to see what's beyond this clearing, but I don't want to leave it behind." "You won't," he said. "Not unless you choose to." She turned toward him. "Do you want me here?" His voice was quiet. "Yes." She stepped closer. "Not just for the helping hands?" "No," he said, meeting her gaze. "For the way you see things. For how you stay." She touched his arm. "Then I'll stay." They rode out the next morning, the trail muddy and soft under the horses' hooves. Naomi sat behind him, arms loose around his waist, head just beneath his shoulder. They passed thawing creeks and the blackened stumps of an old lightning fire, the woods opening slowly into stretches of open land. Town was smaller than she'd pictured, a cluster of plank buildings and packed earth, a narrow street lined with wagons and the smell of leather and smoke. Children darted between horses, women gathered near the general store, and a man swept the stoop of the telegraph office with slow, wide arcs. Thatcher dismounted first and helped her down. His touch lingered at her waist, not cautious, not uncertain. Just steady. Inside the store, she browsed the shelves while he spoke briefly with the clerk, trading pelts for flour, salt, and a small tin of coffee. He returned with a wrapped parcel and handed it to her. "New gloves," he said. "For work." She turned the package over, fingers brushing the string. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." Before they left, Naomi wrote a short note on the back of a ledger scrap and tacked it to the post outside. She didn't use her family name, only her first Naomi, safe and well. She stared at it for a long moment before Thatcher touched her shoulder. "They may never see it," she said. "But you left it," he replied. "That's enough." They rode back slower, the sun dipping behind the ridge as they reached the cabin again. She slid down from the saddle on her own this time and stood beside him, watching the light stretch over the roof. "I want to build something here," she said. "You already are," he said, then added, "So am I." That night, as the fire burned low, she leaned against him on the bench, her head resting where his shoulder met his neck. He didn't speak, just covered her hand with his and laced their fingers together. "I used to think peace was something other people got to have," she whispered. He turned to her, his breath warm along her temple. "Peace is what you build when you stop running from yourself." She looked up. "And what about love? That's what you build when you stop running from someone else." She kissed him, then quietly, steadily, the way everything between them had grown. His hands rose to her waist, pulling her close, and she felt the depth of him in that touch, all the steadiness, all the care, all the patience. They didn't speak after. They didn't need to. Seasons passed. Spring scattered wildflowers along the edge of the cabin, and Naomi planted roots there in more ways than one. She learned the rhythm of the land, the shift of clouds that meant rain by evening, the way cedar cracked different from pine in the fire. She took over setting snares, curing hides, stitching worn seams. Thatcher built her a work table by the window, where the light hit just right. They didn't mark the days with ceremony. They marked them with shared labor, with laughter over burned biscuits, with hands brushing in passing. One summer morning, she stood barefoot by the creek, skirts lifted just above the waterline, and turned when she heard him approach. "I want to marry you," he said, voice low. Her heart leapt, but she only smiled. "I already chose you. We can make it proper. Ride to the preacher." She stepped onto the bank and reached for his hand. "Let's." They married under a cottonwood by the river, the preacher from town speaking the words with the wind in the leaves above them. No one else came. They didn't need them to. Years later, Naomi still kept her walking stick by the door, though she rarely used it. Children's laughter filled the yard, 2 boys and a girl, all with Thatcher's steady eyes and her quiet strength. They grew up knowing the weight of silence and the power in it, too. Thatcher built a second room on the cabin. Naomi filled it with shelves and books traded from travelers and passed down by neighbors. She taught the children to read, to trap, to plant, to mend. They never spoke of the wagon or the road not taken. That life had passed like snow in spring. This one was built from the ground up, each moment laid with choice and care. And in every morning that followed, as the sun rose over the ridge and lit the smoke from their hearth, Naomi woke beside the man who had found her in the snow, and she loved him more for all the days that had come after.